Welcome everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today we are talking about Nintendo Switch 2. Why? Because a new report has come out, and it's offering up some very interesting details, many of which have to do with the controllers for Nintendo Switch 2, but there are some other things as well, and I think when you pull it all together and you consider the circumstances, there are some huge implications here, and that's what I'd like to dive further into today. But before moving forward, let me ask that if you do enjoy my videos, to please subscribe and hit that notification bell. Now, this report is coming from Vandal. Vandal is a Spanish site, they have a history, many consider them to be a reputable site, and I decided to take a look at it for myself. There was some talk about how they reported about Switch OLED back in the day, and that was fairly credible, so I took a look at the report back when they reported about the Switch OLED. And I saw that every detail that they reported back then was 100% spot on. The screen size, the system size, the new dock, the Ethernet port, the SD card slot, the USB ports. And they didn't make any sort of announcement regarding increased horsepower, but they did note that the console would have 4K capabilities, which technically, the OLED and the dock have some theoretical 4K capability, but it's nothing that would actually allow for 4K gaming. So for the most part, their article was pretty good and measured up quite favorably to the other Switch Pro articles from back in the day. But with that I'll say, even though it's a report from a reputable site apparently, still take it with a grain of salt, because unless it's confirmed by some sort of official source here, it's a rumor. But what Vandal has to say is apparently coming from their sources with manufacturers. And their sources are telling them that Nintendo is being extremely secretive about showcasing the system. They were not allowed to see it, simply touch it. That's right, they had to put their hands inside of a box to feel the system so they can get an understanding for the system and the controller so they can make peripherals, and so they have an understanding for a system's shape and feel, but not its look. So before continuing on with the other details, I want to speak on this part first. Nintendo is being extremely secretive, so much so that they're not even allowing some of these manufacturers to see the console. It looks like Nintendo's taking things to another level here, but it also has me very curious if there's anything about the look of the console that is striking compared to the Switch 1. Perhaps those colored buttons we've been theorizing on? Maybe, but there are other possibilities. Anyways, moving on with the report here. From feeling the console, what they came to understand is that it is indeed larger than the Switch models, but it's still smaller than a Steam Deck. So it's still a little bit more slick than the chunky Steam Deck, but it is a bigger system, which bodes well for it having a bigger screen, as we've heard from other rumors, 8 inches supposedly. But moving on, because there's a lot more that they say here. They talk about how there are new Joy-Cons and they connect magnetically, meaning that they are ditching the rail system and strongly implying that the prior Joy-Cons are no longer compatible. And this is very good news because now we're going to get something that's seemingly more sturdy. I'm very curious how this magnetic system will work. Hopefully it works well, I would assume so. But this also seems like an opportunity for Nintendo to intentionally ditch the Joy-Cons with better Joy-Cons that have some sort of improved technology that alleviates or completely mitigates Joy-Con drift, which has been a huge issue that has plagued the console over these years. Now, theoretically, the Joy-Cons of Switch 1 could still be compatible with Switch 2 through some sort of Bluetooth technology, because they're also saying that the current Switch Pro controller is compatible. And that's good news because the Switch Pro controller is not a cheap controller, it's a pretty darn good controller, and I would love to use it in the next system. However, there are some other interesting implications here. One, it suggests that whatever the Switch 2 is, it's not so much of a dramatic departure that it's not worth making the Pro controller compatible. Now I say that, but let's also consider that the Wii U was still pretty different from the Wii, and Wii controllers were compatible with that, so there could still be some significant differences here. But I am somewhat concerned because the Switch Pro controller doesn't have an audio jack, it doesn't have analog triggers, it just has HD rumble, and I say that with air quotes, there are better forms of rumble and force feedback that say something like the PS5 controller has that I'm hoping Nintendo matches or improves in similar ways with the Switch 2 versions of the controllers. So what I'm keeping my fingers crossed for here is that yes, the Switch Pro controller is compatible and so you can use it, but similar to other third-party controllers that don't have all the features you would expect from the main controllers, it'll just be something you can use for multiplayer and things of that nature and games that don't have the extra features, but there will still be a new Pro controller that will have some improved features. That's my own hope. I think it makes sense, but we need more evidence before we can say with certainty. And so that's some interesting things to consider when it comes to the controller situation regarding Switch 2. But Vandal had more to say based off what they were told from their sources. The manufacturers believe and assume it will be backwards compatible. Now, this isn't confirmation, but based off their understanding of the console, that is the sense they have, and I do think it makes sense. And also, if the Pro controller is compatible, that is a huge implication that there is backwards compatibility, which is great news. And I think it's important to note that this report is supporting the idea of backwards compatibility because there have been some people out there that we thought were somewhat credible, but lately there have been things that have popped up that have called their credibility into question. Like Brazil with the entire Nintendo Direct rumor situation, and that almost certainly not being true at this stage. Of course, we'll see what happens in the next couple days. But then also Nash Weedle, who's actually had a longer history of getting things wrong, but more recently has had a better track record. So point is that there's a lot of things they're saying that hasn't been proven yet, and both of these sources have talked about backwards compatibility, but we don't have as great of a track record as we thought we would have for these two leakers. So having a report like this from Vandal that's also suggesting backwards compatibility gives me just a little bit more confidence here, but of course I just think it makes sense. So I am expecting it, same way as the manufacturers apparently. Now, something else interesting that came from this report is that they were told that the console is ready for market. It's done, it's good to go, but they are waiting for a stronger lineup, implying that it's coming out later than expected, which seems to suggest that the rumors of early 2025 are legitimate. Now, because we've gotten so many reports from so many apparent reputable sites already on this is my expectation at this stage. This is what I've been operating under the assumption of. I do like to entertain the possibility that maybe all these reports are wrong, because at the end of the day, they are rumors, and even with this report, apparently they weren't straight up told early 2025, it was simply implied to be coming out later than usual, which seems to lead in that direction. So there's always like that small vestige of hope, but the expectation should be early 2025, if not later. And I say that because Nikkei has suggested that it could take longer, there could even be more delays. But we did talk about at the beginning of the week how it's looking like we have reason to think that the early 2025 timing is a firm timing. This is info that came from Midori back in February, who many consider to be a Puro level leaker. I'm not sure I agree entirely with that, because while they may have a good track record, they talk about things way in advance, which is fun, and I prefer to hear about things way in advance like this. But when you're talking about things way in advance, they're all the more subject to change and delay. With Puro, they only talk about things right before they're going to happen, so the chances of them being wrong are dramatically reduced. Ultimately, what I'm saying here is that things are subject to change. However, when it comes to this report and them talking about how the console is ready for market already, that does suggest that it's pretty much concrete. And Nintendo's getting into the manufacturing process, they are gearing up, and they have something that's close to final, if not final. And it does bode well for a reveal fairly soon. When I think about how secretive Nintendo's apparently being with this, how they're forcing manufacturers to put their hands inside boxes to feel the system so they can't actually see it, it gets me wondering about how long we're going to have to wait before we see this console. Because on one hand, if Nintendo's being so careful about information getting leaked out here, that they're going to these measures, you would think that they would want to reveal the info before it leaks out to the masses from they themselves so they can get the messaging right. But on the flip side, if they are being so secretive, perhaps they're less concerned about things leaking out because of the way they're handling things, where people can't even actually see the console. It's an interesting situation, I would say. But hopefully, the talk of maybe Nintendo telling us something by their investors meeting on May 7th, maybe we'll hear something official then. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.